Aaron Hedges went missing on September 5th, 2014, while elk hunting in the Crazy Mountains in Montana. This was an area he knew like the back of his hand and spent every other weekend up there, in the words of his friends. 2 days after going missing, a huge snowstorm moved into the mountains. Rescue workers stumbled across his shoes and camelback water container. For someone to take off their shoes while there's 18 inches of snow on the ground seems to be a decision someone would make under severe hypothermia. But the strange thing is that 9 months later, his backpack was found 6 miles down the mountain next to a place where someone clearly sat and had a thermos of tea. To add to the mystery, from this location he could clearly see people's houses and a road, but never went to them. 1 year later, his remains were found not far from that location. The only explanation for such strange disappearances seems to be linked to something we don't understand. After researching UFOs and aliens for years, I've come to the conclusion they are a spiritual phenomenon, and that is leading me to research a potential dark spiritual phenomenon causing people to disappear. Let me know what you think. I know it sounds crazy. Leave in the comments what you think is happening in these strange disappearances.
Some missing 411 cases end with the person being found alive. And this is what happened to Stephen Kubacki after he was missing for 15 months. In February of 1978, Stephen Kubacki was a college student in Michigan. Stephen decided to go cross-country skiing. He decided that he would go do his cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan, which was frozen at the time. Stephen didn't show up the rest of that day, and no one thought anything really weird of it. They thought maybe he just went further than he meant to, and he was going to be back late. But when he didn't show up the next day, his family started to get very worried. This is when his family decided to file a missing persons report. We don't often see this, but this time police jumped into action right away and started searches, which is very refreshing in a case of a missing adult. Eventually, these searches found his skis and poles discarded on a beach of Lake Michigan, and they found footsteps going to the water's edge, and then they simply disappeared. Because it was confirmed that the skis and poles were his, it was assumed that the footprints were as well, but there was no trace of where Stephen could have gone. Thinking he could have fallen into the water through the ice, they started looking for breaks in the ice or cracks, anything that would tell them somebody had gone through the ice, but they found absolutely nothing. When this gave them no new leads, they ended up searching around the rest of the area, and when they got back to the beach at one point, his backpack was where his skis and poles had been, but it had not been there when they found the skis and poles. As I'm sure you can understand, many people were kind of confused by this, so they asked each other, like, did you see this backpack here? Was it here when we were here last time? Did we miss it? But no one had seen it when they were there before. After finding this backpack, they found nothing else that would lead them to where Stephen could be or tell them what happened to him. This case took a very unexpected turn on May 15th of 1979, just 15 months after his disappearance. Stephen's father had heard the doorbell to their home ring, so he went to go check who it was, and on the porch was Stephen. This is very odd in itself. Obviously, he was missing for 15 months. No one had seen him. No one knew where he could have been, but the fact that Stephen couldn't recall anything when being asked what had happened was even odder. Stephen stated that earlier that morning he had woken up in a field about 35 miles away from where his parents lived, and that's all he could remember. But this was a few hundred miles away from where his skis and his poles had been found. Stephen also recalled waking up in clothing that was not his, with a bag that was not his either. This bag was filled to the brim with maps that he had no recollection of getting. Stephen states to this day that he has no recollection of what happened for the 15 months he was gone. Doctors checked him out and stated there is nothing wrong with Stephen's mental state, and they had no explanation for why he couldn't remember the last 15 months. Where Stephen disappeared from is known to be on the edge of what is called the Lake Michigan Triangle. It stretches from Ludington, Michigan to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and then to Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And you can kind of think of it as a Bermuda Triangle, but in a Great Lake. The first instance of something unexplainable happening here dates back to 1679 when the Lee Griffins set off to try and find a northwest passage to China and Japan. All went well until they reached the Michigan Triangle and were never seen again. In 1891, a ship named the Thomas Hume went across the lake to go pick up lumber. This boat and its 7-man crew have never been found, even though there have been extensive searches. Not one piece of evidence has been found to suggest they were even there at all. In 1950, a Northwest Orient Airlines flight 2501 traveling from New York to Minneapolis requested cruising altitude of 2500 due to bad turbulence. This could not be granted. The plane never made it out of the Michigan Triangle and no wreckage was ever found. And there are many other unexplainable things that have happened in and around the Michigan Triangle, and it seems that Stephen Kubaki's disappearance is another one of those things. But Stephen is not the only one to have disappeared from this area and reappear without knowing anything that happened to them. In 1990, an 11-year-old boy was walking his dog when he disappeared. Searches started right away, but he was found in a place that others were sure had been searched before. When asked about what happened, he said he could not remember. There's so many other stories of disappearances in this area, and they just make absolutely no sense.
This is the strange disappearance of 82-year-old Thomas Messick. Thomas Messick was a former Army Ranger who enjoyed teaching survival classes and was very experienced in camping and hunting. And in November of 2015, Thomas and 6 other people went hunting at Lily Pond in northeast New York. The 7 men arrived to Lily Park around noon and parked right up against the lake. And before arriving at the lakeside, they set up a campsite a little further up the trail. Each of these experienced hunters had a backpack filled with gear, including walkie-talkies and a rifle. Shortly after getting set up, these 7 men would form what was basically a giant circle so that they could try and push wildlife towards each other. And in the positions of this circle, Thomas was deepest in the woods, furthest away from the lake. About 2 hours would go by before the men realized they weren't finding any wildlife. And during the 2 hours, only one of the men in the group heard a sound which he could only describe as a snapping or crackling sound. And by 3 p.m. that day, the men decided to head back. But when they returned to the lakeside, that's when they realized Thomas was gone. They didn't hear any rifle shots, and they didn't hear anyone communicating on the walkie-talkie, so they began to search. 3 men went up to the campsite, and 3 men stayed on the lakeside with the truck, honking the horn and firing 3 shots to signal to Thomas, "Here we are, come find us." With no sign of Thomas, the forest rangers, National Guard, and a group of firefighters began searching. They would use helicopters, thermal scanners, and scent dogs to search for Thomas. The search would last a week without finding any signs of Thomas. They couldn't even find any candy wrappers which he was known for eating. His friends and family would continue to search for another year, but nothing has ever been found. And to this day, it remains a mystery.
Have you ever felt a strange pull towards a place, a sense of unease you can't explain? In the verdant hills of Vermont lies a region known for its unsettling disappearances, the Bennington Triangle. Since the 1940s, people have vanished without a trace from this area, from seasoned outdoorsmen to young children. Search parties found no clues, no remains, just an unsettling emptiness. The official explanations are as varied as the missing: foul play, accidents, getting lost in the wilderness. But some whispers a more chilling story. Paranormal activity, interdimensional portals, even encounters with Bigfoot get tossed around the campfire. The Bennington Triangle remains an unsolved enigma. Is it a confluence of unfortunate events, or a place where reality itself grows thin? The dense forests of Vermont hold the secrets of the missing. A chilling reminder that sometimes the truth can be stranger than fiction. What do you think happened in the Bennington Triangle? Share your theories in the comments.
See that thing right there? It's creeping me out. I lived here for going on 7 years and walked 100 miles through these woods. Never seen that shape before right there. See it? It's got a funny head shape. It wasn't here earlier. Yeah, no, it's not a stump. It's not a broken tree or whatever. I don't know. It looks like it's connected right there, but it's not. I've been over there 1,000 times. See that thing right there? It's creeping me out. I lived here for going on 7 years and walked 100 miles through these woods. Never seen that shape before right there. See it? It's got a funny head shape. It wasn't here earlier. Yeah, no, it's not a stump. It's not a broken tree or whatever. I don't know. It looks like it's connected right there, but it's not. I've been over there 1,000 times.
Are you familiar with the missing 411 cases? No? Missing 411 refers to a series of unsolved cases of people who mysteriously vanished in national parks across North America. Obviously, it's common for people to get lost in like the woods because it's fucking huge, right?
Yeah, bro, you could like fall the wrong side, get eaten by an animal too.
But it's just the way they went missing, how they were found, how their remains were found. Like there's one case about a guy, his name is Aaron Hedges. Back in 2014, he was elk hunting in the Crazy Mountains in Montana. He was really familiar with this specific area. He got so familiar to the point where like he didn't need a map.
So there's no way he could just get lost.
No, bro. Like, and he even set up these caches on different parts of the area. It has like necessities that he might need, like sleeping bags, food, water, stuff like that. So he ended up going with 2 of his friends on a hiking trip, and they were gonna go set up camp at a lake. So they were gonna go with 2 horses and a pack mule. It was good for the first 2 days, and then on the 3rd day, Aaron decides, you know what? I'm just gonna go to a cache. I'm gonna go get a sleeping bag, get some other materials that we might need. I'm gonna come back. A couple hours later, one of his friends ends up talking to him on the walkie-talkie, and this specific like walkie-talkie, whenever you talk, it shows the GPS coordinate of the other person's walkie-talkie. So whenever he looked at it, Aaron said he was gonna go north to a cache, but on the map he went far east from the cache he was supposed to go. And then whenever they got in contact with him, he was like, oh, sorry guys, I went the wrong way on accident.
But how would he get lost like that?
Exactly. They go out look for him and stuff. They go to where the GPS showed. No sign of him anywhere, bro. Since they found nothing, they eventually ended up calling the authorities. They ended up finding his boots, and next to his boots was a campfire, pack of cigarettes that were his. But it was weird because those same
So y'all are just not going to talk about the little kid who disappeared within like 50 miles of Skinwalker Ranch? Well, I'll be happy to take the reins on that one because you know how I feel about unsolved mysteries. 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley disappeared in the Uinta Mountains August 20th, 2004. Garrett and his father Kevin woke up around 8 a.m. on a Boy Scout camping trip. There were a total of 18 scouts and 6 or 7 adults along on the trip. They headed to a lake for some fishing, and Garrett managed to soak his shoes, socks, and pants. Understandably, Garrett didn't want to wear wet clothes, so he told his father he was going to go back to camp to change. The rest of the Boy Scouts were up a hill only 150 to 250 feet away. Kevin knew Garrett knew where he was, so he allowed his son to walk alone, but kept an eye on him as he went around the lake, even shouting directions of which path Garrett should take. After 20 minutes, Kevin was wondering what was taking his son so long, so he went back to the camp and asked other boys if they had seen Garrett, and nobody had. A huge search of the area with hundreds of official and unofficial searchers started, but they only found a Nike sock belonging to Garrett. The sock was damp and crumpled up like Garrett had taken it off like he was going to get changed, which was in line with what his father said. The campsite was less than a quarter mile away from the lake on a well-established path. Garrett did not have a backpack or any other provisions when he went missing, but he was carrying a short ice fishing pole, which was never located. Hundreds and hundreds of searchers looked for Garrett, even on horseback and using dogs, but no other trace of him could be found. Garrett's sock was half a mile away from where he disappeared in a granite boulder field. Authorities working this case believe that Garrett went into the boulder field trying to find shelter from the cold weather. Because of the mountainous terrain, the temperature dropped to around 18 degrees the night Garrett vanished. Police and Garrett's family do not believe that an abduction took place because there was no evidence of such. And at one point they said they don't believe Garrett made it past the first 48 hours that he was out in the wilderness. The official search for Garrett was called off after 9 days, but family and other volunteers continued to look for him. A 3-mile radius into the mountains was searched from the last place Garrett was seen, but no other evidence was ever found. What is strange about this case is authorities and Garrett's family pretty much wrote off a mountain lion attack and a bear attack. They said there was absolutely no evidence, no trace of blood, no clothing, nothing of Garrett's to be found. Yet they also said an abduction was unlikely. And Garrett was not the only person to disappear in this area over the years. What do you think happened to him?
The disappearance of Sandra Hughes is one of those stories that makes you wonder what is really going on. And if you've heard of the missing 411 phenomenon, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, here's a quick summary. Now, the missing 411 phenomenon was developed by this guy here, David Paulides. And essentially, it focuses on the amount of high disappearances across the United States, even Canada, in remote areas and national forests. It also dives deep into the coincidence between the amount of people disappearing in all of these regions, along with the natural cave system in these areas as well. But not only that, it also correlates with the amount of Bigfoot sightings reported across North America, which has led many people to wonder what is going on out there. and whether or not many of these people that have disappeared in national forests have actually just gotten lost, or whether they succumbed to foul play, or if there's something much more mysterious happening. Which then brings us to the story of Sandra Hughes. Now, Sandra was 54 at the time of her disappearance and living in Maui, and that was when the entire pandemic hit and everyone went into lockdown. And life in lockdown was just not doing it for Sandra, so she decided to take a trip to the Sierra National Forest. She just really wanted to spend a lot more time reconnecting with nature, and she also happened to have quite a lot of experience with the outdoors. She packs up all of her belongings in Maui and moves to California in Madera County. And on June 26, 2020, Sandra hopped into her car and drove towards the forest, specifically to an area known as Johnston Meadows, which is a remote area of the Sierra National Forest. But then a week later, on July 2nd, 2020, hikers in the area saw something very unusual. They came across a campsite that looked to be very disturbed and unorganized. There was cans of food everywhere and personal belongings were thrown all around the campsite. And to them, it looked as if either someone had gotten robbed or someone left in a hurry. Park rangers were then alerted and went to investigate the campsite, and as they were searching, they came across a piece of ID that belonged to Sandra Hughes. They then proceeded to contact her family and ask if this was normal behavior for Sandra, to which they said that was completely out of character for her. She was a very experienced outdoors woman, she was very organized, and she did not litter. And so with that, a huge search began for Sandra. And the biggest clue on their radar was that she had recently dyed her hair blue, and searchers believed that this would make it much easier to spot her. And about 2 days later came the first clue. 2 hikers that were in the area were making their way down a path, and that's when they came across a woman with blue hair, a black t-shirt, and jeans, and she was also barefoot. And to them, it looked like she had had a very quote-unquote rough time. But because this woman minded her own business, she didn't look at them, they figured that she knew what she was doing, and so they didn't bother to ask her if she needed any help. It wasn't until these 2 hikers returned back to town that they noticed all of the posters for Sandra, and that's when it clicked that it was the woman that they had seen on the trail. Searchers then went back to where they had spotted her, but they had no luck finding Sandra. Then another hiker came forward and said that they had spotted an abandoned car. It was located approximately 5 miles away from where Sandra's campsite was, and similar to her campsite, the car looked like it had been ransacked. And then approximately a week after that, a sleeping bag that belonged to Sandra was found near a lake. The search for Sandra would then go on to continue for 2 more weeks, but there were never any other clues that emerged, which eventually led to the search being called off. But then a year later, there was a break in the case. A family were in the area with their 3 young children. As they were enjoying their day, the 3 children then proceeded to complain that they were hungry. And so their parents decided to take a break, find a spot to unpack, and have some lunch. And that's when the youngest child of the group was seen talking to someone by the trees. His father then turns around to see who his son is talking to, but he doesn't see anybody. Although his father was convinced that his son was talking to someone just by how engaged he was in the conversation. So his father asks him one more time who he's talking to, and the boy then turns and points to the woman and says her. But there was absolutely no one there. And needless to say, that was enough to make the family pack up and get out of there as fast as they could. And when they went on to ask the boy what this woman looked like, he gave them a very shocking description. He said that it was a woman with blue hair, a black t-shirt, and jeans. But not only that, he also said that the woman was asking him for help. So his parents take him to the nearest police station where they show him a few photos of women with blue hair. And of course, the young boy picked out all the photos of Sandra Hughes. Immediately, a search team was dispatched to go to the area where the family was. But there was absolutely no sign of Sandra anywhere. And to this day, she hasn't been found, so if you know anything about Sandra Hughes, contact this number here.
Kimberly McJones, NDCNH, and I tried to record this earlier, and shocker, my phone went dead. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about national parks and state parks. And yes, they're protected because they're beautiful areas, but mainly they're protected because they're ley line areas. And most of the ley lines in this country and around the world, not all of them, most of them, or a majority of them, are held by dark forest energies. And because they're held by dark forest energies, underground bases and things have been built under these parks, as well as entrances that have been there for centuries, I guess, to inner earth. So you can literally stumble into a world where you can't navigate and you may not be able to get out. Also, there's a lot of portals because of the ley lines and just the portal energies in these parks. So a lot of times when people are disappearing, they're not being taken by dogmen, they're not being taken by Sasquatch, they're not being taken by aliens. I mean, they might be, but literally they're walking into other worlds. They're walking into inner Earth. They may have stumbled into a base because there's a lot of holographic coverings that people inadvertently, because people are dumb and people are nosy and people can't see the dimensions, and so they can't navigate some of these places, and so they get themselves in things that they can't get out of. Yes, some people are picked off the trail and brought for experimentation and lose time and all of that. Yes, some people are killed by crazies on things like the Appalachian Trail and stuff like that. Not saying there's not logical, quote, 3D explanations, but a lot of the David Pilates 411 stuff is BS. He knows what's going on. He's a paid informant. He's part of the whole thing. He's been proven to be a liar on many occasions. And so a lot of this, in my opinion, is they're walking through portals and they're not being able, to navigate their way back out, or maybe a one-way portal because the ley lines are walking into inner Earth again. They're not being able to get back out. They may be in a base. They might not want them to get back out. So a lot of these disappearances or deaths are a result of not necessarily super mystical stuff, but definitely things that most of you aren't familiar with that some of us are. So my warning and my caution is be very careful when you go. Stay in crowds, stay in the more public places. Don't go off exploring on your own. If you get like a spidey sense of something wrong, pay attention to that. I don't recommend camping in state parks or national parks, which is funny because I basically live practically in a state park, but my property also is a portal property on 4 acres of quartz. So that's going to automatically kind of make it really magical and mystical, which is great for me because of my knowledge and what I do, but it's not so great for other people. Not everybody would love it here. And there's probably places on my property that I shouldn't walk into and I might not get out of as well. So
This next one, Rowan Grifton, he was 2 years old. Him and his family visit grandma's house. I believe this is somewhere on the East Coast, and he is playing with a cat outside. The cat runs into the forest, and young Rowan chases the cat. At some point, the parents realize he's gone. Holy shit, we need to find him. They form a search party, and they start searching. They search well into the night, which could you imagine doing? Like your 2-year-old is missing. You're essentially like the likelihood that your kid is alive goes down.
After 48 hours or something, 24.
It's like, very small window. So the search party goes, you know what? There's a swamp down there. Let's go check that swamp out. They go to the swamp area and they go, Rowan! And they hear, I'm here. 2-year-old Rowan is sitting there in front of them, clutching a tree in the middle of a swamp.
What?
With deep water all around him. And he's completely dry.
What the?
So he's like in the middle of a pond, clutching a tree, completely dry, and he can't swim. Relieved, they bring him back, they ask him, they talk to him. Every time they try to ask him, how did you get there? Like, what happened? What happened? What happened? No memory. The only thing he says is, the cows scared me. The cows led me to that tree.
No.
Which is like, okay. No. Except there's no cows in that area at all.
Bro, that's not Rowan.
The cows.
He just kept saying the cows, and they're like, that's cool. There's no cows out here, my guy. So what are you saying?
What did you see?
Yeah. At least that one ended in he was returned, which is nice.
It was the massive search in the small town of Richmond that had everyone looking for 2-year-old Stephen Rowan Griffin. Rowan, as he's known, went missing sometime Saturday. He was last seen playing at his grandmother's home, and investigators think he may have followed a cat into the woods. And that is where he stayed for hours under the frigid New England sky until a family friend helped locate the missing toddler around 2 a.m. Sunday.
When we found him, he was hanging onto a tree, freezing cold. He was just holding onto the tree for dear life.
Sean Lamoureux has known Rowan's father for years, and he knew somehow he had to help in the search. And he wasn't alone. This group of 5 trekked the area's backwoods, looking for any signs of the little boy. They made it their mission to bring him home.
Every time I'd yell something out, he was very good at responding back. For a 2.5-year-old, he was very, very intelligent.
I scooped him up, and he had a hold of the tree, and I said, buddy, you're all right? I got you. I'm going to bring you home.
Those 5 searchers say they found Rowan in a heavily wooded area like this in the town of Richmond, New Hampshire. They say he was clinging to a tree, and when they called his name out, he called for his parents. Paramedics had to examine Rowan, who ultimately spent nearly 12 hours outside in the cold weather. Amazingly, the little boy is doing just fine. He's back home, and he's as much a normal 2-year-old as ever before.
This is one of the greatest feelings ever, to know that he's okay.
Having him back in my arms finally was like that emotional trigger where it was okay to just feel everything again because it was all okay. It's nice to just be back to normal again.
Reporting in Richmond, Adam Harding, WMUR News 9.
Hundreds of people have vanished in the wilderness without a trace. They call it Missing 411. Mysterious cases where hikers and campers disappear under baffling circumstances. Some are found miles away, in places they couldn't have reached alone. Others are never found at all. No tracks, no clues. Just silence. What's really happening out there?
I said it once and I'll say it again. What the fuck is in them woods? Y'all look at this map. Holy shit. Top is missing people, bottom is the underground cave system. What the actual fuck? You're connected. I don't give a fuck. Don't care what you say. I need y'all to really, really look at this area, okay? Too close. That's entirely too close. The gag for me, though, is that even though California doesn't have that many underground cave systems mapped, at least, look at all the missing people that still match up. We don't know the official number, but as of right now, David Paulides is up to like 1,600 people missing in national parks. And I really think this has something to do with it now. Look at this matchup right here, though, and holy shit, look at that. There's no way. There's absolutely no way that this is not connected to the missing 1,600 people. Back at it with what the fuck is in them woods.
Strange is happening in the Pacific Northwest, a merging of missing people and what seems to be supernatural phenomenon. We'll start off in Humboldt County, which has earned the nickname the Black Hole, and this is because an average of 717 people per 100,000 go missing in Humboldt County every year, giving it the highest per capita missing persons rate in the state. By contrast, per 100,000, California sees 384 missing persons cases on an annual basis. Now, many of these missing cases are probably due to the fact that Humboldt County is part of the Emerald Triangle. People from all around the world come to the Emerald Triangle to grow marijuana legally and illegally. This, of course, leads to probably the majority of the missing persons cases in Humboldt County. But there are still some strange cases. And beyond that, the Emerald Triangle is the beginning of a very strange phenomenon happening in the Pacific Northwest. One strange case of a mysterious disappearance is Christine Walters, who vanished in broad daylight. When she first came to Humboldt, it said she was a gregarious and upbeat person. She then grew paranoid, however, and was convinced someone was out to get her. One day she went out for a walk at 1 p.m. and asked someone for directions at 3:30 p.m., and she was never seen again. When a subscriber passed that article along to me, that Humboldt County is the black hole of California for missing people, it instantly made me think that I know Humboldt County is the beginning of the area where people claim to see a lot of Sasquatch sightings. Now, I don't know what this entity that people are seeing is, but it seems to me that it could be maybe something from the Nephilim offspring, or maybe some type of spiritual phenomenon that breaks from the dimension it lives in into our dimension, the same way UFOs do, that the United States Navy and government now admit are not our crafts breaking through into our dimension. Which got me thinking, I knew that Oregon and Washington, the Pacific Northwest, also have high cases of supposed Sasquatch sightings. So when I typed in Washington missing people rates, I was shocked to see this article. Washington among top 5 states with the most missing persons per capita, the report says. I continued to look into this and found this article, which states have the most missing persons, and 3 out of the top 4 states are in the Pacific Northwest. Now, California isn't even on this list in the top 10 states, but right where California starts to become the Pacific Northwest in Humboldt County, we have the highest per capita missing persons rate per county in the entire nation. Now, there's a few maps that I want to put up on screen that have some striking similarities. First is a missing persons cluster map that we can see here. I'm assuming the information on this map was taken from David Polity's work, Missing 411. Of course, check him and his channel out if you're interested in this stuff. But here we have this missing persons cluster map, and now we can look at a Sasquatch sighting map, or whatever this big entity is walking in the woods. Extremely similar if you look here at the Pacific Northwest. Again, missing persons, and now this Sasquatch entity sightings. I also found this map of UFO sightings from 1995 to 2014. As you can see in the Pacific Northwest, it's practically identical to the other maps. Something worth pointing out as well is a map of the known cave systems in the United States, and as we can see, striking similarities again. Which led me to Alaska and Canada, and it continues to get strange up there. An interesting fact about Canada is that 90% of Canada's population lives within about 100 miles of the United States border. So the vast majority of the landscape and the wilderness up there is completely uninhabited. Canada, of course, bordering Alaska, and there's a strange phenomenon that happens up in Alaska, and it's an area of Alaska known as the Alaska Triangle.
Next person, Garrett Bardsley. And you might have covered this one because this one takes place in the Uintas of Utah.
Oh, shit.
This is at Cubrant Lake. At this lake is a very well-kept, very manicured spot for people to easily come in, park their car, camp, paved paths down to the lake.
Okay.
Like, this is not deep back country. It's a scout trip. So his father, Garrett's father, and Garrett set up camp, and they walk 200 feet from their tent down to the lake to fish. While fishing, Garrett slips and falls into the water. Dang it. Dad, I'm gonna go change. No worries. And he says, just make sure you stick on the path and I'll see you in a bit. And his dad made it a point to watch Garrett walk. And literally, so if you have 200 feet between the tent and the lake, at maybe 150 feet, it bends a tiny bit and you can no longer
Goes
see.
over a little like lip.
Exactly. So he watches Garrett until that lip and he goes down and then he starts fishing. 20 minutes later, he thinks, dude, where the hell's Garrett? He should be back. Goes up to the camp. Garrett's nowhere to be found. Search ensues. They search everywhere. Cannot find Garrett. Only thing they find is one sock.
Oh, damn.
Several, maybe 100 yards, I don't know how far away, in a gravel pit in these big gravel boulders, not far from a pretty popular road, sitting there, and nothing else is ever found ever again. So somehow in between those 50 feet,
just gone.
Men's hearts failing them for things that are coming upon the earth, and in the very last days of Revelation there is entities and things all over the place. This could very well be tied to what is going on here. We know, of course, that giants existed because the Bible tells us so, as well as pretty much every ancient culture on the earth has depictions and stories of giants passed down or painted in cave paintings, and the Smithsonian themselves have been covering up this truth for years. Now, why would the Smithsonian cover that up? Well, because it goes against the theory of evolution that they teach all throughout the world. It would prove the Bible really to be true, bring a lot more validity to it, as well as when they get these very highly sought after bones from the giants, the offspring of the Nephilim, you can be sure that they're selling them to high up people in high levels of prominence within governments and religious organizations around the world, including some of these companies that are probably trying to extract the DNA to bring them back to life. A great Instagram page, if you use Instagram, is Giants of Ancient America, where they document hundreds, at this point over 1,000 news clippings from around the world of old news clippings of the discovery of giant bones. Here's one from Egypt, 1988, 60 giants discovered ranging from 8 feet to 11 feet tall. Another one from Russia, 1901, talking about a giant skeleton discovered nearly 10 feet in height. And another article from 1922 from Indiana, referencing a skeleton of huge proportions, well over 6 feet in height. So we know these giant beings existed, the Nephilim and their offspring. We can pretty much say beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion at least, that people are seeing something in the woods around the world. We don't know what it is. And also, in my opinion again, these people going missing in national parks without a trace seem to have some sort of supernatural connection to their disappearance. And this giant slash super soldier slash entity of some sort could be responsible, and that's the angle I'm looking at here. And you can't talk about missing people in national parks without mentioning Missing 411 and the work of David Paulides. If it weren't for him and his work, this subject wouldn't even be on the map for 99.9% of us. I'll link to David Paulides' YouTube channel in the description below. Lots of good information there. I recommend you check it out, as well as he just released a documentary, and I highly recommend that as well. It was very good. I also in this video don't want to talk about any specific case of a missing person, but we know at this point there's hundreds and hundreds of cases of these people who just seemingly disappear, and I want to point out a few of these characteristics. Many times these disappearances are happening in geographical clusters, near bodies of water, near granite. Now some of the strangest characteristics are sometimes these people are found in areas that have been searched multiple times, as well as the canine units that are used often become confused, can't find a scent, or the scents just disappear. Same with tracks. When the person is being tracked, the tracks often just disappear. Another one that gets me too is many of these people go missing in areas they've been hiking or hunting in their entire life. I know myself personally, I have my spots that I've hiked and I've hunted my entire life, and there is a 0% chance that I would ever get lost there. Now to get back to the opening clip of this video, the story of Jess.
I want to talk about the missing 411 for a minute. Everybody always talks about the cases of Garrett Bardsley and Tom Messick. Man, while those are all very interesting cases, I want to talk about some of the lesser known ones today. Terrence Woods was a 27-year-old man from Maryland. He went missing on October 5th, 2018 in Idaho County, Idaho, in or near the Nez Perce National Forest. He worked on a film crew. They were filming some abandoned mines, gold mines in the Idaho area. And he'd worked in the film industry for several years. He had a few friends on the crew with him. I believe there was 12 or 13 people total on the crew. I don't have my notes with me, so I don't have the exact numbers on some of this stuff. But everything seemed to be going good. He texted his parents and said, "I'm going to be home earlier than I thought I would. I'll be home by October 10th. Well, that never happened, unfortunately. On October 5th, 2018, about 5:30 p.m., he told some of the guys around the fire he needed to go use the bathroom. He got up, he walked away. In the middle of the camp, he threw his radio on the ground, and he took off running. Took off running down a hillside that was pretty steep from what the others reported. A few of the guys chased after him. They couldn't catch up to him. They said they were running faster than they thought a human could run. They chased him down the hill. There was a road with a sheer drop-off on the other side. They got to the bottom of the road. They couldn't find him. They searched up and down both sides of the road. They looked down the drop-off. They contacted the sheriff. Search was launched. And they searched for him for about 6 days. And they never found a trace of him. It's been almost 4 years. And nothing's ever been found. No remains have been found. No clothing's been found. His family has no closure. Now, what I find really odd about this case is it ties into a few other cases. On the same day that he went missing, in the same general area where he was at, a 67-year-old lady went missing as well. And she's never been found either. I'm going to do a video about her next. And it also ties into a previous case. And there's just some really odd circumstances surrounding the whole thing. Like I said, I find this one very interesting because I live within 200 miles of where it happened. I do plan this summer to make a trip down there to the general area of where it happened and do some filming around there and take some pictures and things like that. But yeah, I'm going to do a few videos about these because I find them really interesting, and they're not the ones that get talked about all the time, but they are really strange. So I hope you enjoy.
This is one of the strangest missing 411 stories that I've came across. This case involves a 3-year-old boy named John who was camping with his family at Mount Shasta in California. The family had chosen to camp next to a creek because it was supposed to be a good spot for fishing. Around 6 p.m. one night, the family was cooking dinner. John was playing, and for only a moment, while his parents' backs were turned, John disappeared. Like he was there one second and gone the next. The family is frantically searching everywhere. I mean, how could this little boy have gone more than a few yards away in such a short amount of time at only 3 years old? But John wasn't responding to anyone's calls, so police and park rangers got involved and everyone searched for 5 hours. The sun had gone down at this point, the family was getting desperate, but John was found safe and alive, curled up in a patch of grass. Strangely, he was found in an open area on a trail that had already been searched multiple times. It was like he had just been placed on the side of this trail where he could easily be found. So John was alive and well, the family is happy, but 3 weeks later he was staying with his grandmother, who he called Kathy, because her real name was Kathy. And John told Kathy something disturbing. He said he didn't like his other grandmother, Kathy, as much as her. And Kathy was confused. She was like, "What do you mean, John? You don't have another grandmother that you call Kathy." This is when John told her that while he was lost in the woods a few weeks ago, someone that he called his other grandmother, Kathy, grabbed him. John said this woman had the same hair and face as his grandma Kathy, but she took him to a cave that was filled with spiders. She then did some sort of medical examination on John, told him that he was not from Earth and that his parents didn't know about this. John said that when he saw the other Grandma Kathy in the light of the cave, that her skin shimmered and made her look like a robot. Then this being that looked like the other Grandma Kathy took John back to the trail where he could easily be found. Now, maybe this all just seems like a child's wild imagination, but Kathy, the real grandmother, had been camping in the same area that John had disappeared a year before. One morning while she was camping, she had woken up outside of her tent, face down on the ground, with no memory of how she had gotten there. She also had a painful lump on the back of her head, which she thought was a spider bite. When she got back to the tent, the friend she was camping with had a similar bite, and he was really sick. The night before, Kathy and her friend woke up with these bites on them. They had been hearing weird noises in the woods, so they pointed their flashlights at the trees. They saw red eyes staring back at them, which gave them an eerie feeling, but they brushed it off. But after the events of the next morning, John's disappearance and his story about the other Kathy believed that those red eyes staring back at her were whatever that thing was that abducted her grandson and took on her.
Disappearances in Yosemite National Park, I tell you, they are one and the same. They go together. Now, Jean and her boyfriend, Mike, were dating for 10 years. Things were going so swell, they were engaged. And in June of 1995, they set off to Yosemite. The couple had decided to take separate routes, short separate routes, and they were going to meet back up in 15 minutes. Now, this is where it gets very dicey, and I suggest you don't never do this. So Jean had taken off, and she was by herself. Mike had showed up at the location where they had agreed to meet at, but Jean was nowhere to be found, no trace of her. He did look around for a short time, maybe 10 minutes, but very quickly knew that things were really bad. Search and rescue got involved very quickly on. They were also looking to Mike as a potential suspect in the case. They gave him a polygraph. He passed indefinitely, and they were not looking at him any further. The problem is the dogs couldn't pick up scents. The rescuers could not find her. They had scoured across that mountain, and no trace of her clothing or anything had turned up. Didn't look to be a struggle. Something's off. Now, on September 3rd, 1995, a couple of fishermen would come across a body in a small pool of water. This body was completely nude except for socks and one boot. The area in which her body was found is an area that is pretty inaccessible to really anybody but like mountain climbers, and these fishermen when they came across, I mean, because they were kind of wading up this river, were like, yeah, mountain climbers is what we would expect. Like, those people can get up here, but this body didn't have no clothing. Had a couple socks and one boot. While these national parks are very beautiful, and clearly Yosemite being one of them, because many a people go, but it is nothing to trifle with. Don't you be going and wandering all up in the wilderness by your lonesome. If you haven't learned anything from my content, you watch it again then.
When I think of weird disappearances in national parks, few of them really haunt me the way that 4-year-old Alfred Beilharz did. Alfred was one of 10 children, and they were all camping in the Rocky Mountain National Park when something very strange happened. They're walking through the park at one point in a line, and Alfred is towards the back of that line. At one point, Alfred either wanders off or something else happens, but the family doesn't notice right away. When they finally notice Alfred is missing, it starts a 10-day manhunt for him. From the beginning, authorities were working from the assumption that Alfred had somehow fallen into the river and drowned, even though his family didn't agree. So they dammed the river so that if his body wasn't there, it couldn't get out. In other words, the body wouldn't be able to float to another region of the park or beyond. They also raked the bottom of the river, but no trace of his body could be found. At this point, the family was like, we believe he was abducted, so they changed tactics. They brought in bloodhounds to search for his scent that way, and boy, did they get a surprise. Instead of leading the searchers towards the river like everybody assumed they would, they instead led them up a 500-foot cliff, which ended at a plateau. Authorities followed the dogs, and when they reached the plateau, the dogs laid down like they had found Alfred and reached the end of the scent trail. Now, obviously, authorities were confused by this because there was no trace of Alfred up there, but to the dogs, it was mission accomplished. They acted like they had found Alfred. The authorities figured they must be broken, something's wrong, let's get another group of dogs. So they did, and those dogs did the same exact thing. While the search is going on, 24 hours after Alfred originally disappeared and 6 miles away, a couple on a hike sat down to take a rest, and the man looked up towards the mountain and saw a child peeking out from about 500 feet up. The man stared at the child for a sec, and the kid seemed to look over the ledge, make a shrill shrieking noise, and then it was like he was jerked backwards. He suddenly moved back towards where the man could no longer see him. The couple didn't know Alfred was missing, so they didn't report it right away. This location up the mountain was known as Devil's Nest, and even trained climbers would struggle to reach it, let alone a 4-year-old child. Authorities were understandably skeptical that a 4-year-old child made it 6 miles away that quickly and made it up there, but they sent people to search at least a day later, and no sign of Alfred could be found. So to recap, the plateau almost 500 feet up where the bloodhounds hit and the Devil's Nest 6 miles away are the only places they really had a clue that Alfred had been there. And yet still, they never found him. The family believed all along that he had been abducted, but the question is by who? The family did receive ransom notes several months later, but they don't think it was related. So the question remains, how did a 4-year-old child who was in front of his family disappear without a trace only to be spotted in improbable places, but a body was never found?
Probably one of the most disturbing and unnerving missing person cases I've heard is this of Dennis Martin. Dennis and his family went camping and hiking in Smoky Mountain National Park in 1969. Dennis was only 6 years old, and him and his family came upon another family that were also hiking and had young children. They all stopped to rest, and the kids started playing together, and Dennis and his brother were playing hide and seek, and Dennis decided to hide in some bushes. His father was watching them the entire time as they played as well. The thing is that Dennis never returned from those bushes that he was hiding in. He just never came back out. So a search began, and it was very widespread. Like, the Green Beret were there, FBI was there, local volunteers, everybody came out to find this child. This search went on for over 6 weeks, and the only thing that they found was a sock and a shoe. This spot down here where it says Spence Field is where he went missing. And up there by Rowan's Creek is where another family that was hiking reported seeing a big, hairy man carrying a child. They said they saw this because they heard a child screaming, and that's what they saw. And wouldn't you know it, this is located right on the Appalachian Trail. A very widespread theory is that this was a feral person and he kidnapped Dennis and took him somewhere in the woods where he's still not been found to this day. Especially because the area where Dennis went missing and the area where he was seen was so far apart in such a short period of time when this report happened. It doesn't make sense for him to have ran through the woods at 6 years old with one shoe on through terrain like that in such a short period of time.